I still remember that night vividly, the night my life changed forever. Back then, I was just an 8-year-old girl, curled up in the back seat of an old car, clutching the stuffed bear I had never been apart from. The night sky was calm, a deep blue streaked with faint orange glows from the streetlights. I didn't feel uneasy because our destination was Grandma Eleanor's house, a place where I always felt safe. Grandma always welcomed me with a gentle smile, the warm scent of freshly baked cookies, and comforting hugs. Every visit to her house was special because I knew she would tell me wonderful stories and let me touch her treasured collection of old books, something only I was allowed to do. But this time, things were different. The car came to a stop on the gravel road in front of her porch. I waited for my mother to turn and look at me, but she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Her face wasn't angry, nor was it sad, just cold in a way I couldn't understand. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, avoiding my gaze as if my very presence made him uncomfortable. Finally, my mother turned around, her voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. "We just need a little time to sort things out, Allison. Be a good girl and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" No further explanations, no promises of when they would return, not even a hug. I nodded, trying to be obedient, just like she expected. I still didn't realize something was wrong. I still believed that tomorrow or the day after they would come back for me. But as I stepped out of the car, dragging my small backpack with a few hastily packed clothes, Grandma Eleanor was already standing at the door, her eyes filled with sadness but still as gentle as ever. I turned back one last time. "Mom." The car was already pulling away. No wave goodbye. No one looked back. I ran after it for a few steps, my chest tightening as the taillights faded and disappeared down the road. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I hadn't yet understood that I had just been abandoned. Grandma Eleanor wrapped me in her arms, gently patting my back as if to reassure me. She didn't ask any questions, she simply led me inside, where the familiar scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air. She made me my favorite dinner, chicken noodle soup, but I just sat there staring at it, unable to take a bite. That night she read me a bedtime story, the same one I had heard countless times but still asked her to read again. Her voice was slow and soothing, but I couldn't focus. When the lights went out, I curled up in the warm bed, burying my face into my stuffed bear, waiting for the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. But the only sound outside was the wind. The next day I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the road in front of the house. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, the whole day. No one came. I kept waiting. A week passed. Every afternoon I sat there, watching every car that drove by. My heart leaped at the sound of an engine, only to sink again when I realized it was a stranger. 2 months. My parents still hadn't come back. When my classmates talked about their families, I just smiled and said nothing. I stopped asking Grandma Eleanor when they would return because I had begun to understand. They weren't coming back. But no matter how much I understood it logically, emotions were different. Every night, when the house grew silent, I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to stifle the quiet sobs that caught in my throat. I didn't want Grandma to hear, didn't want her to worry. But on some nights, she still came into my room, sitting at the edge of my bed, her wrinkled hand gently rubbing my back. "It's not your fault, Allison," she whispered. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, but that has nothing to do with you." I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But how could I when the truth kept haunting me, when the same question kept repeating in my mind? Why didn't they choose me? Grandma Eleanor was never one for flowery words or grand gestures of affection. But she loved me in her own way, with patience, with warm meals placed on the table every day, with simple yet profound lessons, and most of all, by never mentioning those who had abandoned me. Her house was small, nothing like the lavish mansions I had seen in magazines, but it was always warm. She had an old Toyota that she still drove, even though she could easily afford a newer one. The house had bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with the old books she cherished. Every morning, I would see her reading the financial section of the newspaper, sometimes nodding in approval at an article, sometimes furrowing her brows in thought. I didn't understand the numbers she read, but I knew that whenever she closed the paper and looked at me, her eyes always held pride. "Why do you like reading that stuff?" I once asked on a quiet morning, absent-mindedly stirring my cereal. She set her tea down, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "Because knowledge is power, Allison, and when you learn how to make money work for you, you'll never have to depend on anyone." At the time, I simply nodded, not fully grasping the weight of her words. But I didn't know then that the lessons she taught me that day would stay with me for the rest of my life. Under Grandma Eleanor's care, I slowly adapted to my new life. I stopped looking out the window every day, no longer waiting for a strange car to appear. She taught me how to bake cookies, how to tend to the small flower garden behind the house, how to think logically instead of letting emotions take control. And most importantly, she never once let me feel unloved. She was also the first to recognize my love for science. One day, when I was 9, she walked into the kitchen and found me experimenting with something. I had mixed baking soda and vinegar in a cup, eagerly watching as the bubbles fizzed over the rim. "Well," she said, crossing her arms as she observed, "looks like we have a scientist in the house." I looked up, my cheeks flushing slightly with embarrassment. "I was just trying something." She smiled. "Experimenting is the best way to learn, Allison. But if you want to create something bigger, perhaps we should do it the right way." The next day, she took me to a bookstore that specialized in children's science books and let me pick out anything I wanted. I chose a book about simple chemical reactions and a small experiment kit. She never said no when I asked for more books, and she never let me believe that anything was impossible. By the time I was 13, I had worked on a project about bacteria and how they reacted to their environment. I spent hours researching, experimenting, and recording results. When the state science fair approached, I nearly gave up, afraid that I wasn't good enough. But Grandma Eleanor wouldn't let me quit. "Allison, success isn't about never failing," she said, looking at me firmly. "It's about continuing even when you feel like giving up." Her words kept me standing. I didn't just participate in the competition, I won first place. As I stepped onto the stage to receive my trophy, I searched for her in the crowd. And when I saw her standing in the back row, her eyes filled with pride, I knew that every effort had been worth it. The years that followed passed peacefully, but Grandma Eleanor never stopped preparing me for my future. On my 18th birthday, she arranged a small dinner at our favorite restaurant. It wasn't anything extravagant, just my closest friends, a few old teachers, and people she considered family. After everyone had left, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, her voice warm. I opened the box and found a delicate necklace with a tiny key pendant hanging from it. "What does this key open?" I asked, running my fingers over its smooth surface. She didn't answer right away, just smiled. "You'll understand someday." I didn't press further. I knew she always had a reason for everything she did. At the time, I didn't know that this would be the last gift she ever gave me. I didn't know that just 3 months later, I would receive a phone call that changed everything. And I certainly didn't know that this tiny key would open the biggest door of my life. I got the call on a quiet afternoon in the middle of the month. When the hospital's number appeared on my screen, I knew something was wrong. My hands turned cold as I picked up, and when the voice on the other end spoke, calm, polite yet urgent, I knew my life would never be the same again. Grandma Eleanor was gone. A sudden heart attack. She hadn't had time to call anyone, hadn't left any final words. The nurse said it had happened quickly, but that did nothing to ease the pain crushing my chest. I hadn't gotten to say goodbye. I hadn't gotten to hold her one last time. I hadn't told her how much I loved her. The days that followed felt like a blur. I ate because I knew she wouldn't want me to fall apart. I arranged everything, handled the funeral, greeted the guests, because that's what she would have wanted. But inside, I felt hollow. The house was cold now, missing her voice, missing the warmth in her eyes whenever she looked at me. The funeral took place on a gray, somber day, as if the sky itself mourned her loss. The church was packed. Former students of hers traveled from all over, some now doctors, engineers, teachers, all saying that she had changed their lives. I sat in the front row, my heart tightening as I listened to each story about her kindness and wisdom. And just when I started to feel like she was still here with me, just when I began to find comfort in the beautiful memories of her, they appeared. My parents. I sensed their presence before I saw them. My whole body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Then I turned my head, and at the far end of the church, they were walking in. My mother looked different. Her hair now streaked with gray, her face no longer holding the youthful look I remembered. My father had gained weight, but he still carried himself with the same self-assured stance. Except today, he wore a mask of feigned sorrow. They walked toward the front row, as if they had the right to stand there, as if their presence was about genuine grief for Eleanor rather than for show. My chest tightened. 10 years. 10 years without a single word. No letters, no phone calls. Yet now, with Grandma Eleanor gone, they returned. My mother spoke first. "Ellison." Her voice was gentle, as if nothing had ever happened. "We came as soon as we heard. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. I'm truly sorry for your loss." I stared at her, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask them why they were only appearing now, why, when I needed them the most, they weren't there. But I simply clenched my fists, holding on to my composure. My father let out a deep sigh, feigning sadness. "This has been so hard. I know you're grieving, sweetheart. But don't worry. You're not alone anymore. You're coming home with us." I felt the blood in my veins turn cold. "Home," I repeated, my voice sharp. My mother nodded, reaching out as if to take my hand, but I took a step back. "You're still not 18. You're still our daughter. Now that Eleanor is gone, you need family by your side." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. I could feel the weight of the stares around us, but I didn't care. I looked at them, their eyes filled with forced patience, but I wasn't the naive 8-year-old anymore. I knew they weren't here for me. They were here for Eleanor's wealth. I met my father's gaze directly. "Are you here for me, or for Grandma's money?" Silence. I saw my mother blink, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she masked it quickly. My father leaned forward, his voice firm. "Of course we're here for you, Allison. We're family. What are you thinking?" A real family wouldn't have abandoned their child without a word. A real family wouldn't wait until there was something to gain before reappearing. I took a deep breath, my voice steadier than ever. "I'm not going anywhere." My mother's expression darkened. "Allison, don't be stubborn. We are your parents." "No," I said, locking eyes with them. "The only family I had is gone." The truth of that statement lodged itself in my throat, but I didn't cry. Because at that moment, I realized I no longer expected anything from them. They had left me once, and I would never give them the chance to do it again. The tension in the law office's conference room was suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sitting at the head of the table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across from me, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed gray suit meticulously arranged the documents in front of him. Eleanor's attorney. I didn't know what to expect. A part of me felt empty, another part was terrified. But more than anything, I just wanted this to be over so I could leave. My parents sat across from me, wearing their usual expressions of forced patience. But I saw the flicker of anticipation in their eyes. They weren't here for me. They were here for what Eleanor had left behind. The attorney cleared his throat, turned a page, and looked at me directly. "Allison, my name is Richard Carter, your grandmother's legal representative. I am here to read her final will." I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. He picked up the document and began reading. I, Eleanor Grace Montgomery, being of sound mind and acting of my own free will, hereby declare this document as my final testament. My chest tightened as his voice echoed in the room. The will detailed various charitable donations Eleanor had arranged, small gifts to her close friends. But when he reached the most significant part, his voice slowed. All properties, investment holdings, bank accounts, and personal assets, totaling an estimated value of $52 million, are to be left entirely to my granddaughter, Allison Grace Montgomery. The room went silent. My parents froze. My mother reacted first. She shot up from her chair, her eyes wide with panic. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." My father narrowed his eyes, his voice turning rigid. "This is not how things were supposed to go. We are her children. We have a right to this inheritance." Attorney Carter remained unfazed by their reaction. He calmly slid a folder toward them. "I'm afraid neither of you have any legal claim to Eleanor's estate." He pointed to a document on top. 10 years ago, you both signed this, relinquishing all legal guardianship over Allison. Do you remember?" My mother's face went pale. "That was just paperwork. We didn't mean—" The attorney shook his head. "This is a legally binding document. Once you signed it, you forfeited any rights over Allison, including any claim to her inheritance." I looked at them, waiting for a glimmer of regret, a sign that they realized their mistake. But all I saw was anger and desperation as their plan unraveled before them. My father clenched his jaw. "She must have been manipulated. There's no way she would leave everything to a child like that." Attorney Carter remained composed. "Eleanor was an extremely intelligent and meticulous woman. Before her passing, she ensured that this will was legally verified by multiple witnesses and attorneys. No one manipulated her." My mother's hands clenched, her voice trembling. "We are her family. We deserve at least a portion." "No," I cut in, my voice firmer than ever. They turned to me, shock and frustration evident on their faces. I met their gaze, my tone calm but sharp. "Family is the people who stand by you when you need them the most. The ones who love you unconditionally. The ones who raise you, teach you, and hold you when you're hurting." I took a deep breath, gripping the small key hanging around my neck. The last gift from Grandma Eleanor. "You abandoned me a long time ago, and now I'm doing the same to you." My mother's eyes burned with fury. "Allison, you don't understand. If you don't share with us, there will be consequences." I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Consequences? Do you think I'm afraid? You taught me an important lesson. I don't need anyone who only wants me for what I can give them." My father slammed his hand against the table. "You'll regret this." Attorney Carter interjected before I could respond. "You have the right to contest the will if you wish, but I warn you, everything is legally sound. There are no loopholes to exploit." Their faces twisted with frustration. I knew they realized they had lost. Finally, my mother stood, her expression icy. "Mark my words, Allison. You may have all the money, but you will never have a real family." I looked at her, feeling a wave of emotion rise in my chest, but it wasn't pain or fear. It was relief. I stood, adjusting the necklace around my neck, and replied steadily, "I had a real family, and you were never a part of it." Then I turned and walked away, never looking back, because I knew this was the last time I would ever have to face them. I thought everything was over after the reading of the will, but I had underestimated their greed. A few weeks later, I received a call from attorney Richard Carter, informing me that my parents had filed a lawsuit to contest the inheritance. They claimed that Eleanor had been manipulated into writing the will, that she had been mentally unfit in her final years, and that an 18-year-old like me was incapable of managing such a large estate. I wasn't surprised. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. But I also knew that Eleanor had prepared for everything. We had all the necessary paperwork, medical records proving she had been fully competent when drafting the will. Every asset had been legally arranged and transferred. There was no loophole for them to exploit. The case was quickly dismissed. I assumed that after their failure in court, they would finally give up. I was wrong. That day, I was at Montgomery Enterprises, the investment firm Eleanor had founded, when the front desk receptionist paged me over the intercom. "Miss Allison, there are 2 individuals downstairs claiming to be your parents. They are demanding to see you immediately." I sighed, setting down my pen and leaning back in my chair. I was exhausted by this endless cat-and-mouse game. "I'll be down." As I stepped out of the elevator, my resolve hardened. I was no longer the 8-year-old girl crying on a porch. My parents stood in the middle of the grand lobby, drawing the attention of employees and clients alike. My mother had her arms crossed, impatience written all over her face, while my father stood tense beside her. The moment they saw me, they immediately approached. "Allison," my mother spoke first, her voice still carrying that same false sweetness. "We need to talk." I kept my distance, folding my arms. "What is there left to say?" My father stepped forward, his tone deepening. "We can't let things end like this. You know that." I let out a quiet chuckle, devoid of warmth. "End like what? The way you abandoned me 10 years ago without a second thought?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't speak like that, Allison. I know you're upset, but this isn't just about the past. This is about family, about what's rightfully ours." I raised an eyebrow. "Ours? What right do you think you have to anything?" I looked straight at them, my voice cold and unwavering. "You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money." My mother blinked but didn't deny it. My father took a slow breath, then leaned in slightly, his voice lowering into something darker. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take more drastic measures." I tilted my head. "Drastic measures?" My father clenched his fists. "We could make this public. The media would love a story about an 18-year-old stealing her parents' inheritance." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you threatening me?" I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. "Go ahead, tell your story to the press." I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making sure every word carried weight. "Tell them how you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter without a word of explanation." My parents stiffened. "Tell them how you tried to deceive your own mother to take her fortune." My mother glared at me, but I wasn't finished. "Tell them how, for 10 years, you never once called, never once asked if I was alive or dead. And then, when Eleanor passed away, you came back, hoping to take what was never yours." Silence engulfed them. I saw it in their eyes, the fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the truth being exposed. They knew that if this story came to light, they would have no escape. Finally, my father was the first to turn away. His jaw tightened, and he muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. My mother lingered for a few seconds longer, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when she saw that I wouldn't waver, she lowered her voice. "Remember this, Allison. You may have the money, but you will never have a real family." I held her gaze, my resolve unshaken. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." She pressed her lips together, then turned and walked away with my father. I stood still, watching them leave the building. This time for good. I didn't feel heartbroken. I didn't feel regret. For 10 years I had waited for a family, but now I understood. I had never lost one. I had Eleanor, and that was all I ever needed. I sat in Eleanor's old office, a room I hadn't dared to step into since the day she was gone. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the dark wooden desk. Everything remained untouched. The stacks of neatly arranged financial books, the white porcelain teacup resting on the shelf, and the framed portrait of her hanging on the wall, her sharp yet kind eyes watching over me. Before me was a small wooden box, a sealed envelope resting on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. "To my dearest granddaughter, Allison." Her voice seemed to echo in every word. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. That breaks my heart, because I never wanted you to feel alone. But remember, even though I am no longer in this world, I will always be watching over you, in every step you take. The handwriting was slightly shaky, but still precise. I ran my fingers over the ink as if somehow she was still here with me. You have always wondered why your parents left you, and I know that question has hurt you deeply, but the truth is, they didn't just leave you. They tried to take everything I had. When they realized I wouldn't be deceived, they chose to walk away. But I have never regretted keeping you. You were the greatest gift they unknowingly left behind. I clutched the letter, my heart aching. Allison, I'm not just leaving you wealth, I am leaving you a legacy. I spent years building Hope Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping abandoned children just like you once were. I quietly used my resources to give opportunities to those who had no one to protect them. And now, I want you to continue this work. I blinked, my throat tightening. I know you have the strength to do this. You have always been resilient, intelligent, and kind-hearted. Do not let the past hold you back. Use what I have left you to change the world in whatever way you see fit. At the bottom, her final words stood alone. I have always believed in you, and I love you forever. Tears fell silently onto the paper. I spent the following weeks learning everything I could about the Hope Foundation. The organization's office was in a modest building Eleanor had purchased years ago. Inside, I met the dedicated staff who had worked alongside her. People passionate about helping children in need. One of them, Linda, a woman in her 50s with streaks of silver in her hair, approached and took my hand. Sweetheart, Eleanor always said that one day you would come here. She smiled warmly. She believed you were the only one who could continue what she started. I looked around. The walls filled with photos of smiling children, files documenting lives that had been changed, letters from those who had once been orphans but now had a future. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Linda shook her head. You're here. That's already a great start. And I decided I would make it happen. Alongside managing the charity, I also took over Montgomery Investments, the firm Eleanor had built over the years. Initially, the board of directors doubted me, a young woman with no prior financial experience. But I refused to let them underestimate me. I spent hours studying, attending every meeting, learning from the best in the company. I remembered Eleanor's words, knowledge is power. And I used that power to prove I was worthy of the role. 1 year later, as I stood before the board, presenting my plan to expand the firm's investments into more social impact projects, I saw something new in their eyes. Respect. I was no longer just an heiress. I had become a leader. I could have bought anything, but I kept Eleanor's old Toyota. It sat in the garage, covered in a thin layer of dust, but I never had the heart to sell it. Because it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of the values she had taught me. To live simply, work hard, and always help those around me. I wasn't just the inheritor of Eleanor's fortune. I was the keeper of her ideals. I am not just her heir. I am her legacy. Life isn't always fair, but how we face adversity defines who we become. Allison was abandoned, she was hurt, but she refused to let her past define her. Instead of being consumed by betrayal, she rose above it, turning her pain into purpose. A true legacy isn't measured by wealth, but by the impact we leave on the world. By continuing Eleanor's mission, Allison didn't just find her calling. She proved that we are not defined by what we have lost, but by what we choose to build. What do you think of Allison's journey? Did she make the right choice in standing up to her parents' greed? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and life. They say some moments never fade, like a tiny scratch on the heart that only becomes clearer the more you try to forget. For me, that moment was my brother's engagement party. The night I realized I'd never truly belonged to this family. Never been welcomed, never been one of them. It was an unusually cold April evening. The hotel ballroom sparkled with lights and laughter, glasses clinking in a rhythm I couldn't connect with. Everyone looked stunning in pastel gowns and sharp tuxedos. As for me, I wore a long-sleeved deep purple dress, plain and forgettable, I didn't want attention. I just wanted to stay in the shadows, like always. Beside me, my daughter Emily clutched my hand, her wide eyes dazzled by the twinkling lights and the pristine white floral wedding cake. "Mom, is this like the parties in princess movies?" she whispered, full of wonder. I tried to smile, but my heart sank. Ryan, my brother, stepped onto the stage with his fiancée, Meredith. They looked like they had walked straight out of a magazine. Ryan wore a tailored cream suit, and Meredith shimmered in a silver gown. Hair pinned up, makeup flawless, eyes cold as ice. When Meredith's gaze swept the room and landed on me, I saw it. Her expression changed, like she had spotted something that didn't belong. A second later, she leaned toward my mother and whispered something. My mother didn't ask for clarification. She just nodded. That familiar, final kind of nod that had made so many decisions for me growing up. She stepped away from her group of guests and walked toward me. Her heels tapped sharply against the marble, her shadow stretching behind her in the glow. "Angela," she said, her voice low but crisp, "please, don't go near the stage tonight." I blinked. "Why?" "Meredith feels your presence might bring discomfort. You understand, don't you? This is Ryan's special day." A sharp sting spread through my chest. I said nothing. I wanted to believe I had heard her wrong, or that she was joking. But her face didn't change. No anger, no emotion. Just a cold indifference. Like what she said was obvious and not up for discussion. I heard myself ask, "You mean I bring bad luck?" "Angela," she sighed, tilting her head. "You know how things have always gone. Your father passed away on your birthday. Your marriage didn't work out. I'm not blaming you. But today isn't the day to take chances." I couldn't breathe. The room still buzzed with music and laughter, but to me it all fell silent. That old familiar feeling returned. That I was the odd piece that never fit, never meant to be part of happy moments. I nodded. No protest, no questions, just nodded. Because I was used to being excluded. Because I no longer had the strength to prove I wasn't a risk. Emily tugged at my hand. "Mommy, why aren't we taking pictures with Uncle Ryan?" I bent down and brushed her hair gently. "Because not everyone sees special the way we do, sweetie." Emily frowned, confused, but the look in her eyes, first puzzled, then quietly shifting into something else, told me she was beginning to understand something she shouldn't have to. And I didn't yet know that look from my 7-year-old daughter would spark what no one in that room would be able to forget. I don't remember the exact color of the dress I wore that day, the day I became a ghost in my own family, but I remember the phone call. It rang around 7 p.m. while I was coloring my science homework with a nearly worn-out pencil. My mom ran to answer it. When she returned, her face was pale. No one said a word. I asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" And she simply said, "Your father won't be coming home." My father died in a car crash. A sudden rainstorm, a head-on collision on a slippery road. He was on his way to buy my birthday cake. I had just turned 8. That night, I didn't just lose him. I lost my mother's warmth. She never said I was to blame, but she never denied it when others implied I might be. I once overheard my aunt whisper to my mom in the kitchen, if he hadn't gone out for that cake, maybe things would have turned out differently. My mom didn't nod, but she didn't object either. She just stirred her coffee. That's when I learned to live quietly. People whispered that I was unlucky, that maybe I brought misfortune. I didn't fully grasp those words at first, but I began to notice how my mother's eyes would change when I entered the room, how her voice was always softer when she said Ryan's name. My brother, born 2 years after that fateful day, like an attempt to fill the void I had unknowingly left behind. Ryan had everything I didn't. Attention, pride, expectations. I wasn't jealous. I loved him. When we were little, he used to grab my hand at family gatherings and whisper, "Angela, come play with me." He was the only one who made me feel seen. But that changed. In high school, Ryan shined. Smart, athletic, popular. Meanwhile, I lost my scholarship due to depression. I wanted to become an architect, but no one in the family believed I could do something practical. They said, girls should be more realistic. Who's going to hire someone to design houses? I fell in love at 21. He was gentle, patient. I thought I had found a safe harbor. But after 2 miscarriages in 3 years, everything fell apart. He left a letter on the table. I tried. But every day with you feels like a wound I don't know how to heal. I didn't blame him. I was used to being left behind, quietly. For years, I drifted. No direction, no anchor. Only Emily kept me grounded. Doctors said I had less than a 20% chance of a successful pregnancy. But Emily arrived, healthy, strong-willed, radiant like a miracle. And my mother? She held the newborn in her arms and said, "Let's hope she doesn't carry her mother's fate." I thought I'd grown numb, but a single sentence like that made me want to vanish. What I never got used to was how my heart still clung to the hope that one day my mother would hug me, not out of duty, but because she truly wanted to. But even tonight, at Ryan's dazzling engagement party, I was still on the sidelines. My mom stood on stage, hand in hand with Meredith, her perfect future daughter-in-law, beaming for the cameras. No one mentioned me. No one noticed me. I knew if I slipped out quietly, no one would call me back. No one at all. Only Emily still held onto my hand, as if her world didn't need anyone else but me. Her eyes showed no fear, no confusion, but something in them made me shiver. As if she was about to do something I wouldn't be able to stop. Emily swayed beside me, her hands dancing to the music only she could hear. The lights reflected off her soft brown hair, making her look like a tiny angel lost in a world of invisible rules and quiet prejudice. I looked down at her, trying to swallow the lump in my throat left by my mother's words. "Mommy, what does that cake taste like? Is it vanilla, like the one I like?" Emily asked, eyes wide like glass marbles. I nodded, trying to smile. "Maybe, but I think we should stay here, okay?" She tilted her head, puzzled. She didn't understand, and honestly, I couldn't explain to a 7-year-old that her mother wasn't allowed near her own brother on his big day just because some people thought she brought misfortune. Emily squeezed my hand gently, her little, warm hand. "Mom, is it because we got here late?" I bent down, forehead to forehead with her. "No, Angel. You didn't do anything wrong. If there's one thing in this world that kept me from falling apart, it's Emily. After all the heartbreak, she's the only reason I still believe I'm worthy of love. I used to think I couldn't be a mother, that my body was just an empty shell incapable of holding life. But then Emily came, miraculously, like the world still owed me one last chance. I remember the first time she had a fever at 10 months old. I was so panicked I held her all night, afraid to even blink. I was the one who sat by her bed after every nightmare, repeating the same fairy tale so many times I had every punctuation mark memorized, just to help her fall asleep. No one helped me in those early years. Not a single phone call from my mother, not a word from any relative. But Emily was never short on love. I once promised myself, no matter how much the world turned its back on me, I would never let my daughter feel as alone as I once did. And yet here we were, at a family party, where she saw the disapproving look from her grandmother, the awkward silence from the aunts and uncles, and Meredith's cold smile the moment we walked in. I could only hope Emily didn't notice, that she was still innocent enough to believe in beautiful things. "Mom, can I go look at the candy table? Just look. I promise I won't take any," she whispered. I nodded. "But don't go too far from me, okay?" She giggled and took off, her dress fluttering behind her with each skip. I watched her small figure disappear into the crowd, my heart swelling with a mix of sweetness and ache. No one here understood me, and they didn't need to. But Emily? She saw me, listened to me, believed in me with no conditions. When she came back holding a pink candy someone had given her, I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you promise not to take anything?" "I don't take it," Emily chirped. "The man at the table said I was the cutest girl tonight and told me to pick one." I laughed. "You really know how to melt people's hearts." She sat beside me, propping her chin on her hand like a little grown-up. "Mom, how come no one asked you to be in any pictures? Don't they know you're the best at posing?" I said nothing. That question, so simple, cut deeper than any insult. I awkwardly brushed her hair and murmured, "Sometimes people don't realize what's special until it speaks up." Emily looked up at me, her expression suddenly serious. "Do you think if I speak up they'll understand how amazing you are?" I shivered. "Emily, all you need to do is be yourself. I'll handle the rest." She nodded, but I could feel something stirring inside her, like she was planning something I couldn't stop. And even though I was nervous, I couldn't dim the light growing inside her, a light I had never dared to ignite for myself. I thought I could quietly stay in the background until the party ended, keeping the peace for Emily's sake. But life never favors those who just want calm. The MC's voice echoed through the hall, inviting both families to the stage for the ring ceremony. Music swelled, sweet and elegant, like sugar coating a cake that had already gone stale. People moved, lights shifted to the front. I stayed where I was, alone among the emptying chairs, wearing that familiar faint smile like a mask I knew too well. Emily glanced around, then tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, why aren't we going up?" I bent down and whispered, "Because today is Uncle Ryan's day, and sometimes people don't want anyone else messing with the picture they've painted." She frowned. "But you didn't mess anything up." I tried to respond, but my throat closed. How could I explain that just existing made them uncomfortable? Emily didn't say another word. She just sat there, feet swinging, but her eyes stayed on the stage, watching those perfect smiles under the lights. I didn't notice when she slipped away. Not until I saw her light blue dress weaving through the chairs toward the front. I froze. "Emily," I called softly, voice cracking. "Come back." But she didn't stop. She didn't rush either, just moved with a quiet confidence, like she already had a plan. I pushed through the crowd, whispering apologies, trying not to draw attention. But it was too late. People had started to notice Emily. The whispers began. She stopped near the stage. From where I stood, I saw Ryan smiling awkwardly, while Meredith's eyes turned icy as she spotted my daughter. My mother stood behind them, stiff, lips pressed tightly. Then, Emily walked right up to the microphone on the podium. My heart nearly stopped. "Emily, no!" I almost cried out as the music faded. She had to stand on tiptoe to reach the mic. Someone moved to stop her but hesitated, maybe because of the strange calm in her 7-year-old eyes. "Excuse me," Emily said, her voice clear across the room. "I just want to say something." The hall fell silent, like the air had been sucked out. Every eye was on her. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. "My name is Emily, and my mom, she's the best person in the world." Murmurs broke out. Someone behind me gasped. "People say my mom brings bad luck," Emily continued, without a single tremble. "But I don't think so. She takes care of me when I'm sick. She works hard so I can eat yummy food and read comics every night. She never yells. She just hugs me." I saw my mother squint slightly. Brian looked confused. Emily turned to Meredith. "Miss Meredith, you shouldn't say things like that about my mom." Meredith froze. "I heard you tell Grandma Ryan's easy to control, marrying him will be less of a headache, but you told everyone you love him." A collective gasp rippled through the room. A phone lifted, then another, recording. Meredith's face flushed red. Her lips quivered but said nothing. My mother looked stunned. Panic in her eyes. For the first time that night, Emily ended with a sentence that floored me. "If anyone thinks my mom doesn't belong here, they're wrong. My mom isn't bad luck. She's the luckiest thing in my life." Then she gently placed the mic down and stepped off the stage, small and steady in a room that had gone utterly silent. And I stood there, speechless. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to defend myself. My daughter had done it for me, in front of everyone. I don't remember what happened in those first few seconds after Emily left the mic. Maybe it was the sound of a camera shutting off. Maybe it was my heartbeat drowning out everything else. The room was packed, yet it felt eerily still, like the entire crowd forgot how to breathe at once. Emily looked back at me, eyes clear and steady. She returned before I could move, wrapping her hand tightly around mine. Her tiny fingers squeezed my palm, as if to remind me. I'm not alone. On stage, Ryan hadn't moved. He was staring at Meredith, trying to make sense of who she really was. Meredith stood frozen, scanning the room like she was looking for an escape, but no one came to her rescue. She looked at my mother for help, but Mom just stood there, lips pressed tight, gaze shaken. Ryan pulled his hand away from Meredith's. "You really said that?" His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Meredith still forced a smile, lips trembling. "Ryan, it was just a silly comment. I didn't mean—" "Is it true or not?" Ryan interrupted, his voice firmer now. The room held its breath. Meredith froze. Then, instead of apologizing, she crossed her arms. "Who doesn't say silly things when they're tired? That kid doesn't know anything. She's just a child." Big mistake. Ryan's expression changed. His eyes darkened, jaw clenched. He stepped forward, paused, and slid the engagement ring off his finger. Without a word, "Ryan, are you kidding me?" Meredith rushed after him, reaching for the ring. "You're ending everything over a child's words?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm ending it because I stopped trusting myself a long time ago. I let others speak for my heart, but today, a 7-year-old reminded me who's always been there, who truly deserves respect." Then Ryan turned and walked straight toward me and Emily. My mom stepped out to stop him. "Ryan, don't do this out of emotion." But Ryan didn't slow. He walked past her like she was smoke. No more hesitation, no more doubt. When he reached me, he paused, eyes red. "Angela," he said, using my name for the first time in years. "I'm sorry. I saw you, but I didn't have the courage to stand by you." I stared at him, throat tight, unable to speak. "You did everything alone. Since Dad died, you took care of me, calmed my nightmares, listened to my high school heartbreaks. You didn't deserve to be cast out like this, and I owe you an apology." He hugged me. No words, just a tight, real hug, the kind that says a brother has finally come home. Emily stood beside us, smiling up at me. Then Ryan bent down and hugged Emily too. "Thank you, Emily. You're braver than all of us put together." A small applause began from the far side of the room. I turned. Uncle Frank, my dad's younger brother, was smiling and nodding, as if someone had finally said what he never dared to. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The people who once pretended not to hear began whispering. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others looked at Meredith with puzzled expressions. My mother took a step back, and for the first time her eyes met mine without the usual blame. Instead, there was confusion, maybe even a sense of being lost. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Meredith would cause a scene or my mother would try to restore order. But in that moment, I knew I was no longer alone. No longer the one left behind. I used to think I had to stay silent to keep the peace, to avoid making others uncomfortable. But Emily, a 7-year-old child, taught me that some truths, if left unsaid, will keep crushing us day by day. And today that truth had been spoken. The entire room had heard it. No one could ignore it anymore. The next morning, as the first light crept through the curtains, I lay still with my hand resting on my forehead, as if the night before had been a dream. a wave of emotion so overwhelming I hadn't fully processed what had happened. Then the phone rang. Soft but certain, pulling me back to reality. A message from Ryan. "Hey sis, I don't really know how to start, but I just want you to know I'm grateful. Grateful that you've always been there, even though I didn't really see it until yesterday. Thank you. And thank Emily, too." I read the message over and over, afraid the words might vanish if I blinked. A warmth spread through my chest, not because of an apology, but because for the first time, I felt seen. Less than an hour later, I got a call from Uncle Richard, my dad's younger brother. His voice was warm, just like I remembered when he used to take me to the park after my father's funeral. "Angela, I just want to say, I'm proud of you," he said plainly. "Last night I saw your father in you, calm, brave, and never silent in the face of wrong. You did the right thing, not just for yourself, but for Emily. I think it's time this family learns what real love looks like." I couldn't find the words. He was the only one in the family who never called me a burden or a mistake. But for years, like most of them, he stayed silent, and now he was the first to break that silence. That afternoon, while I was making lunch for Emily, the phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made me freeze. "Mom." I stood still, finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to avoid the confrontation, but then I thought of Emily's eyes last night. The strength in them that I had never been able to find in myself. I picked up. "Hello? Angela," my mother said. Her voice was the same, not high, not trembling, but for the first time it lacked its usual certainty. "I just wanted to ask if you and Emily got home okay." I blinked. "Yes, we made it back safely." A few seconds of silence. I could hear the clink of her teacup on the other end. An old habit of hers when she was unsure. "I was thinking of stopping by, bringing some cookies for Emily. She still likes chocolate chip, right?" Her voice softened, just a little. Not quite an apology. But in a relationship fractured over decades, a call like this was already a long journey. I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me, so I said quietly, "Yes, I think Emily would like that." That evening, Emily and I lay on the couch, her head resting on my lap, holding her favorite stuffed bear. She looked up and asked softly, "Mom, are you sad Grandma didn't say sorry?" I paused for a moment, then smiled and brushed her hair. "I think sometimes people need more time. What matters is they've started to listen." Emily nodded, her eyes beginning to close. "I just want them to know you're the best mom in the world. They won't have to wait long. I'll tell them for you." I hugged her tight, feeling her steady little heartbeat against my chest, a quiet reminder, I am not alone. The next day, a bouquet of flowers was delivered to our door. No name, just a small handwritten note. "For those who were once made to feel invisible, now it's your time to shine." I knew it wasn't a miracle. People don't change overnight. But I also knew, because of Emily, a door had opened. Not one inviting me into a party I was once excluded from, but one leading me out of the limits that had been placed on me my whole life. And for the first time in years, I didn't just step out, I walked forward, believing I deserved it. I was no longer the one labeled bad luck. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep in my arms, I sat alone on the little balcony of our apartment, a warm cup of tea beside me, the flickering lights from the windows around us pulsing like the heartbeat of the city. I thought about everything that had happened over the past few days. Things I wouldn't have believed if someone had told me in advance. I used to think silence was the only way to survive in a family that branded me as unlucky. I accepted the sidelines, convinced that quiet sacrifice was all I had to offer. But Emily, my 7-year-old daughter, stood tall in a room full of adults and said aloud what I never dared to. And I realized then, I was never unlucky. I was just the first one in our bloodline brave enough to break the cycle. For years, they called me a problem or bad energy, but when I looked closer, what I really brought was honesty, a voice that didn't bend to the unspoken compromises everyone else had grown used to. I didn't follow the rules they taught: stay silent to keep the peace, endure so no one loses face, bear the weight to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. And because I was different, they decided I was the problem. Turns out the problem was never me. It was the silent system within this family. A place where pain was hidden, and anyone who spoke up was seen as a threat. And Emily, a little child, taught me that speaking up isn't disrespectful. It's a form of love, a way of protecting what's right, a declaration that says, "Mom deserves better." I used to shrink myself to fit into the mold others set for me. I used to ask how I could fit their image: gentle but never defiant, present but never seen, kind but never asking for anything in return. But not anymore. I won't shrink to meet anyone's expectations again. I am Angela, a single mother, a woman who once stumbled, who was once dismissed, who stood in the shadows. But I'm also someone who got back up, who raised a child that knows how to love, how to be brave, and how to speak the truth. What took me over 30 years to learn, Emily understood at 7. I won't apologize for being different, because it's that difference, that refusal to conform to old expectations, that set me free. Yesterday, Ryan sent another message. "I've been thinking about taking some time off to travel for a few weeks. Maybe I'll start by visiting you and Emily, if that's okay." I smiled. This wasn't the distant Ryan anymore. This was a brother truly trying to reconnect, not out of obligation, but out of real love. And the biggest surprise came just hours later, when my mother sent a text. "If you have time, I'd like to see you. Not to talk about anything big, just to sit with you for a while. Would that be all right?" I didn't reply right away, not out of anger, but because I needed to be sure that if I went, I'd go as an equal. Not beneath, not apologizing for who I am. I closed my phone, stood up, and pulled the blanket over Emily. She was fast asleep, her cheeks still flushed from a day full of emotion. I whispered softly, knowing she couldn't hear. "You rewrote my story, sweetheart, and I'll never let it repeat itself." I walked back to my room and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I started writing. Not a resume, not a job application, not a complaint letter, but the first lines of a book about women who've been mislabeled and their journey to reclaim their true names. Angela's story isn't just about reclaiming her voice in a family that once dismissed her. It's a symbol for anyone who's ever been labeled, who stayed silent just to keep the peace. From being called bad luck, Angela stood up, broke the mold, and gave both her daughter and herself the right to be loved the right way. She learned that courage doesn't lie in endurance, but in speaking up for what's right, even when no one else dares to. What do you think about Angela's journey and young Emily's bravery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next powerful and heartfelt story about family and love.